The night doesn't announce its turning point. It just happens. A bassline cut mid-throb, a body folding as if someone pressed a hidden switch, hands lifting in slow confusion while a small plastic spray appears like a lighthouse in a pocket, and a word you've never said out loud. Nita Zane slides into the room without drama or thunder, only the soft, merciless certainty of something so strong and so small that it can end a song, a joke, a future, before anyone has time to understand what went wrong. This is not a story about monsters in alleyways, but about a molecule that learned how to pass for a friend, a laboratory phantom that vanished from textbooks, only to return through supply chains and shortcuts, sold not with a skull and crossbones, but with the borrowed faces of party pills and counterfeit comfort. It works not by shouting but by reaching the quiet switch deep in the brain where breathing is choreographed without our consent, a touch so efficient that the body forgets to move air, and the room, for a second, forgets to move time. Yet even here, where the danger is invisible and the temptation is familiar, there are people who keep their heads clear, there are tools that pull the drowning back to the surface, and there are choices we can make before the music stops. Choices that sound less like sermons and more like survival. It was late enough for sweat to feel like glitter, for promises to sound believable, for a pink tablet stamped with confidence to travel from palm to palm in the hopeful way small miracles do. And if this were an ordinary mistake, it would have ended in an ordinary regret, a long sleep and a longer lesson. But the first collapse was a quiet crumple, the sort that steals the breath from a crowd, because it steals breath from a person. And in that split second, the difference between a dance drug and a death drug became not a chemical lecture but a human scene. Volunteers moving like practiced shadows, chins lifted, air delivered, a nasal spray pressed and counted, 20 minutes of borrowed light, then the dark tugging again as if the tide inside the chest had changed its mind. Someone killed the speakers because the beat was in the way of the heart. Someone called the ambulances that glide like metal birds and do not care about tickets or lineups. And somewhere behind the sirens a truth sharpened itself. These were not MDMA effects gone sideways, not a mismeasured night, but the cold precision of nitazines disguised as fun, 1,000 times stronger than the stories people tell each other on bathroom lines, strong enough to turn a guess into a eulogy, strong enough to make timing the only currency that matters. And when dawn finally seeped in through the fire doors and no one had died, gratitude didn't arrive as applause but as a vow whispered with hoarse voices and trembling hands that next time knowledge would be earlier, tools would be nearer, and nobody would mistake a counterfeit promise for something their lungs could afford. In another country, in a house where the curtain's never quite close because light helps the grief breathe, a mother climbs the stairs the way you walk through a dream you already know will end badly. The music from her son's room is still playing softly, something half-finished as if he'd only stepped away for a moment. She calls his name once, twice, and then the world narrows to a single point, the stillness, the color leaving his lips, the sound of air refusing to return. He wasn't reckless, he wasn't trying to die. He was 21, a musician who wrote about hope and small happinesses. The heroin he thought he knew was different that night, laced with a powder whose name he'd never even heard. Nitazanes don't shout when they enter the bloodstream. They whisper. They promise relief so absolute that even your lungs obey. When the paramedics arrived, the house felt heavier, like the air itself had decided to grieve. The mother stood by the door as they tried everything. Oxygen, adrenaline, every reversal she'd later learn to pronounce. But the drug was faster. It had no face, no smell, no warning, just efficiency. Later she would replay it over and over, the unopened letter on his desk, the coffee mug with a ring of sugar around the rim, the thought that he wasn't supposed to die that day. He'd done the same thing before, she said quietly, the same amount, the same ritual, but this time it wasn't heroin. It was something 1,000 times stronger, something that doesn't give you a second chance. And so the world shifted. Her story became a warning whispered in classrooms, in clinics, in quiet interviews where reporters struggled to hold eye contact. She spoke not with anger but with a calm that makes you listen. He thought he was safe, she said, and that's what kills you, the thinking you are. Far from her living room, under the bright flicker of computer screens, other hands were busy. No needles, no smoke, no street corners, just code, catalogs, and instant messages. A dealer in another time zone typed with a salesman's rhythm, $7,000 per kilo, express shipping. No customs issues. The product line looked sterile, almost elegant, as if death had learned to advertise itself. The reporter's voice on the call was steady. "How will you send it?" he asked. "Express post," she answered. There was no hesitation, no disguise. To her it was business. To the world it was a new epidemic traveling in brown envelopes and padded mailers. That's the strange thing about the 21st century drug trade. It doesn't hide in shadows anymore. It hides in plain sight, buried between ads for supplements and cosmetics. The same networks that ship phone cases and vitamins also carry powders that can kill you for breathing near them. Each transaction is clean, efficient, tracked by logistics systems that know your address better than your friends do. And somewhere between that screen glow and the grief of a mother in England, the world learned again that evil rarely looks like what we expect. It doesn't snarl, it smiles, it types, it offers free shipping. In Canberra, Australia, on a Friday night that smelled faintly of rain and printer ink, a small glass vial arrived at a testing facility no bigger than a classroom. Inside, barely visible, was a few grains of powder seized from a club where the music had stopped mid-beat. It looked harmless, like flour, like dust, like nothing. But when the chemists placed it under the spectrometer, the screen pulsed with a pattern they hadn't seen before, a molecular fingerprint from another century. The lead scientist, Professor Malcolm McLeod, leaned closer to the monitor, the bluish light reflecting off his glasses. He didn't have to check twice. The signature was clear. Nitazenes, the same family of opioids once shelved in the 1950s because their strength had made them useless to medicine, 1,000 times more potent than morphine, a compound so unforgiving that even laboratory gloves couldn't guarantee safety. He pressed a few keys, and within minutes an alert went out across state lines: highly potent synthetic opioid detected in recreational drug sample, potential fatal risk, emergency response advised. By morning, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters wanted explanations. Health departments wanted guidance. Parents wanted to know what 1,000 times stronger than morphine actually meant. McLeod tried to answer carefully. But how do you translate that kind of danger into human language? 1 milligram, he said finally, holding up a pinch of air between his fingers, can kill a grown man. 2 can kill several. The speed of that night, the test, the message, the warning was unprecedented. For once, science had outrun tragedy. Normally, discoveries like this come after the funerals, after the coroner's reports, after the quiet collective shame of realizing we were too late. But this time, the data came first, and the data screamed. In the sterile hum of the lab as the machines continued to blink, McLeod stood silent for a moment. The hum of the fluorescent light above him felt almost holy in its persistence. He thought about the clubs, the pills, the people who just wanted to dance. He thought about how progress, for once, didn't mean inventing something new. It meant recognizing an old danger before it could take another breath away. Outside, the rain began to fall, washing the city in a dull metallic rhythm. Somewhere, sirens echoed again, but this time he hoped they'd be heard in time. In the heart of Sydney's King's Cross, hidden behind a nondescript door marked only by a discreet plaque, stands a place where people come not to vanish but to survive. The walls are white, the air clinical yet strangely kind, and behind every counter sits someone who's learned that compassion can exist even in the face of chaos. Here the staff know the rhythm of an overdose the way sailors know the rhythm of storms, the slowing breath, the soft collapse, the quiet before the lungs forget their duty. Dr. Marianne Joni has been here for more than 20 years. Her eyes are calm but never indifferent, her hands always moving, preparing oxygen masks, measuring doses, resetting the line between life and death one patient at a time. We've intervened more than 11,000 times, she says, her voice steady, and no one has ever died. She doesn't say it with pride. She says it like a vow, one she renews every day. She explains that nitazenes terrify her not because they're mysterious, but because they're efficient. They don't create chaos. They create silence. They switch off the part of the brain that remembers to breathe, she says, demonstrating with a simple gesture, one hand lifting to her throat, the other tightening slightly, as if showing how the body quietly forgets itself. You don't even feel fear. You just stop. And yet in this small room, stopping doesn't have to mean ending. Dr. Joni keeps a small orange device at arm's reach, naloxone, the antidote, the breath in a bottle. She demonstrates it gently, pressing the spray to a dummy's nose. It's time-sensitive, she explains. Every second counts. We breathe for them until they can breathe again. She remembers the first time nitazens appeared in New South Wales. It was 2021, and nobody recognized the symptoms fast enough. I was terrified, she admits quietly, because I knew what it meant, that the line between life and death had just gotten thinner. Now she trains her team like soldiers, not for war but for minutes, those golden minutes when knowledge and movement can outrun the inevitable. In the corner, a volunteer refills a tray of masks. The fluorescent lights hum. Somewhere outside, the night begins again. Another crowd, another song, another handful of risks traded for relief. But inside this quiet sanctuary, there is stillness without surrender. Machines blink softly. Breaths return. And for every overdose that ends here, another life walks back into the city, a little shaken maybe, but alive. Because here, in this strange half-world between science and mercy, survival isn't an accident. It's an act of grace. By the time the ambulances reach the festival, dawn has begun to creep pale and tired over the city skyline, turning the wet asphalt into ribbons of dull silver. Paramedics move quickly, voices clipped, gestures precise. They've seen it before, but never this strong. The patients, mostly young, mostly frightened, are breathing again, thanks to naloxone, the miracle spray that forces the lungs to remember their purpose. But the relief doesn't last. 20 minutes later, one by one, their chests begin to slow again. Nitazenes don't obey the usual rules. One dose of antidote is not enough. It's as if the body wakes for a brief moment, gasps, then slips back under. Intravenous lines are started, syringes prepared, oxygen masks adjusted. The field hospital looks like a strange ballet, controlled chaos set to the rhythm of shallow breaths and clicking monitors. Every single person needs to be transported. Every single one needs help to stay alive. Caitlin, one of the volunteers, watches the scene unfold with her hands trembling only slightly. She's done this for years. Seen overdoses, panic, confusion, but this night feels different. They just dropped, she whispers to a medic beside her. No warning, no build-up. They thought it was MDMA, but it was pure nitazenes, just poison. When she finally steps outside for air, she can still hear the silence left behind after the music stopped. The sun is rising now, painting the hospital tents in gold and exhaustion. Inside, doctors and nurses are still fighting for every minute. Caitlin looks at the long line of stretchers and feels something strange, not despair, not even anger, but clarity. She realizes that these are not stories about addiction. Not really. They are stories about confusion, about the space between what people think they're taking and what they actually swallow. It's about chance, about the cruel lottery of modern chemistry where one counterfeit pill can end everything. And yet that night, no one dies. Not because fate decided to be kind, but because people paid attention, because someone noticed early, because the antidote was ready, because hands moved faster than fear. When the last ambulance door closes and the last siren fades into morning, Caitlin finally sits down, knees pressed to the cool ground, and whispers a prayer that isn't set religious but sounds like one. Let them learn before it happens again. And above the empty field, the first light of day falls softly, as if promising that maybe this time someone will listen. In the dim light of an office half a world away, a journalist stares at a glowing chat window where death is being sold as if it were perfume. No codes, no encryption, no hesitation, just a message written in polite English. $7,000 per kilogram. We can ship tomorrow. Express, no customs problem. It takes less than a minute for the deal to feel real. He types slowly, his fingers trembling slightly. How will you send it? The reply comes instantly. Express post, very safe. Many clients in Australia. Her voice, when they switch to a call, is calm, almost pleasant, like someone taking a dinner order. Where are you from? She asks. Australia, he answers, pretending to sound casual. No problem, she replies. We have shipped there before. The camera flickers, her face never quite visible, just the faint outline of a smile. Then the call cuts. That's the new frontier. No dark alley, no whispered exchange, just a digital handshake and a promise. The drug that once required secrecy now travels wrapped in barcodes and bubble wrap, passing through customs with the same quiet ease as birthday gifts and spare parts. It's a business without conscience, efficient in the way only modern logistics can be, every gram tracked, scanned and delivered to a door that never expects the knock of tragedy. In England, a mother scrolls through those same images, horrified by how simple it all looks. Her son had ordered heroin through the dark web once. It came in a plain envelope left in the letterbox among bills and flyers. She didn't know, couldn't have known, that inside was not what he thought it was. Not heroin, not something predictable, but nitazines, pure and merciless. I still check the mailbox, she says softly. Even now, I still expect him to come down the stairs and grab the post before me. On TikTok, teenagers share coded lists of reliable sellers. Hashtags disguise themselves as jokes. Each click leads deeper into a maze of availability, and somewhere, behind a factory wall in China, workers mix powders with gloves and masks, not because they fear moral consequence, but because inhaling even the dust could kill them. The irony is unbearable. A system built for speed and convenience now delivers poison faster than medicine. And yet, inside that darkness, the journalist's recording remains. Her voice, light, efficient, deadly, is the proof that the world's next epidemic doesn't arrive with gunfire or panic. It arrives in the mail. In the white hum of a university laboratory surrounded by glass beakers and softly blinking monitors, Professor Malcolm McLeod holds up a speck no larger than a grain of sand between his tweezers. This, he says quietly, could kill you before you've even realized you've touched it. He isn't exaggerating. What he's holding is less than 2 milligrams of nitazene powder, a substance so potent that even the residue on a countertop could stop a heartbeat. The vial in his hand had come from a government testing center the week before, disguised inside a batch of counterfeit painkillers. It looked identical to a common prescription pill, the kind found in bathroom cabinets and desk drawers across the world. But the chemistry told another story. On his screen, lines of molecular code stretched like razor wire, sharp, complex, and unmistakable. Nitazines were created in the 1950s, he explains, voice low, almost reverent. They were meant to help, to heal, to numb pain, but they worked too well. So well that a dose safe for a mouse would kill a man, and for half a century they slept. He pauses, letting the hum of the machines fill the air, until someone somewhere decided to wake them. What frightens him most isn't just their strength, it's their purity. Unlike street fentanyl, often diluted and inconsistent, nitazenes are laboratory perfect. A microgram too much means instant respiratory failure. There is no slow drift, no warning. One moment you are laughing, the next your body forgets how to breathe. He turns to a student standing beside him, eyes wide. Do you see this? He asks, pointing to the chart. That spike? That's a molecule 1,000 times stronger than morphine. That's what's in the clubs now. That's what's hiding in fake oxycodone pills, in MDMA tablets, even in vape cartridges. You can't smell it, you can't see it, and by the time you feel it, there's no time left. The student swallows hard, staring at the glowing screen. How do we stop it? She finally asks. McLeod exhales, his shoulders sinking. We don't stop it, he says. We outrun it, with knowledge, with testing, with the truth. Science can stop greed, but it can save a life faster than greed can take one. Outside, the evening light fades against the glass windows of the university, reflecting a city unaware of what waits just beyond the edge of understanding, a powder born in forgotten laboratories, reborn in the bloodstream of the modern world, and now spreading, silent and invisible, like a new language of death. And yet, somewhere in that silence, the machines keep blinking, steady, patient, alive, because the work of saving lives is slower than disaster, but it never stops trying. At St. Vincent's Hospital in Sydney, the emergency lights glow with that pale, sleepless hue that never changes, whether it's 3 in the morning or noon. Behind the triage desk, the doctors move like soldiers, quiet, coordinated, their steps rehearsed by repetition and exhaustion. On the shelves, rows of orange kits, labeled naloxone, line up like ammunition against an invisible war. Dr. Paul McCartney, 25 years treating addiction, 25 years watching the drugs change faster than policy, opens one of the kits and places it on the table. This, he says, holding the nasal spray in his palm, is the difference between a funeral and a second chance. His voice is rough but measured, the kind of voice that has said the word death too many times and learned not to flinch. He demonstrates it slowly, thumb on the plunger, nozzle angled just right. Anyone can use it, he says. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't even have to know the person. You just have to be there. Then, quieter. It sips like CPR for the lungs. He tells me that in the United States, naloxone is already being carried by parents, teachers, even cab drivers. In Australia, the law has only just caught up. You can walk into a pharmacy now and ask for it. No prescription, no judgment. He looks up, meeting my eyes. If you love someone who uses, or even if you don't, you should have one of these at home, in your car, in your pocket. Around us, the emergency ward hums with its usual chorus, the beeping monitors, the low murmur of nurses, the wheels of stretchers moving over linoleum. But tonight, there's a tension that feels new. The doctors know what's coming. They've read the warnings, the chemical reports, the sudden clusters of overdoses in other cities. It's only a matter of time before nitazines hit Sydney in full force. McCartney sighs, rubbing a hand over his face. We've seen this movie before, he says. First in America, then in Canada. Fentanyl was the opening act. Nitazens. They sept. The sequel no one wanted. He looks at the wall clock, the slow, steady ticking that counts lives in minutes instead of hours. The thing about these drugs, he says softly, is that they don't just take people, they take time. They take the seconds we need to react. And if we lose those seconds, he doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't have to. He packs the naloxone back into its box, his hands steady again. But if you act fast, he adds, you can steal those seconds back. You can bring someone home. Outside, the city is quiet, unaware of the silent battle unfolding in its veins. In a dark pocket of the hospital, a new kit is logged, labeled, and placed on the shelf. Another life waiting to be saved before the sirens arrive. Across Australia, in back rooms and storage closets, a quiet army is forming. They're not police, not soldiers, not saints, just people who've decided that breathing is too sacred to gamble with bureaucracy. Community workers, club organizers, nurses, even parents. They're learning how to use the nasal spray, how to check a pulse, how to spot the first signs before the fall. At a small training center in Brisbane, a woman named Fiona demonstrates to a circle of teenagers how to save a life. She's not much older than them, but she speaks with the calm authority of someone who's already seen the cost of waiting too long. If they're not breathing, she says, holding the dummy's chin, you don't panic, you act. Spray, breathe, count. She hands the device around like a secret meant to be shared, a ritual of resistance. There's no applause when the session ends. Just silence, a silence heavier than fear. They all know someone. A cousin, a classmate, a friend who vanished into a bad batch and a worse headline. Meanwhile, in Canberra, government officials argue about terminology, decriminalisation, policy reform, moral hazard, as if words could outpace chemistry. But out here, where the overdoses happen, semantics don't matter. Seconds do. Dr. Marianne Joney still remembers the first time she saw nitazines in a toxicology report. It was 2021, she says, and I thought, this is it. This is how it starts. The quiet pandemic. She hasn't been wrong. Hospitals are quietly stockpiling naloxone. Pharmacists are lobbying for wider access. Harm reduction vans patrol festivals under the guise of safety checks, their staff trained to intervene before the music stops again. It's not heroism, it's realism. Everyone knows what's coming. And yet, amid the fear, There's something unexpectedly beautiful about this resistance. A mother's trembling hands learning how to spray a dose. A stranger kneeling beside a collapsed body whispering, "Hold on, I've got you." A doctor who refuses to look away. A volunteer who stays until dawn just to make sure no one slips under. In a world where policy lags behind chemistry, humanity becomes the only real antidote. Outside, the first night of summer begins, music rising again from the festivals, laughter echoing through city streets. But somewhere among the crowd, in a pocket, in a purse, in a jacket sleeve, a small orange device waits, silent and ready. It's not a cure, but it's hope. And sometimes hope is enough to keep a heart beating long enough for the light to find it again. The term sounds academic, something you'd hear in a lecture hall, not in the back alleys of a city that can't sleep. But out here, it's not theory, it's prophecy. The iron law of prohibition. The more illegal a drug becomes, the stronger it will evolve to be. The more we tighten our grip, the more potent the shadows become. Every generation thinks it can outsmart chemistry. Every new policy declares another war on drugs, another campaign poster promising safety through force. But in the end, the laboratories always adapt faster than the laws. Fentanyl was born from that arms race. Nitazens are its perfected child. A molecule that fits into an envelope, slips past scanners and sells death by the microgram. Dr. Joni leans forward in her chair when she speaks about it, frustration glowing beneath her calm voice. "We SIP been fighting the wrong battle," she says. "You can SIP outlaw chemistry. You can only get ahead of it." Behind her, the walls of the clinic are covered in posters about safe use, test kits, overdose symptoms, a quiet rebellion against stigma. She taps her pen against the table. Every time we ban one compound, another emerges. Stronger, smaller, deadlier. That's what the law of prohibition guarantees. She pauses, looking at the ceiling light flickering softly above her. We keep thinking we can scare people into safety. But fear doesn't keep you alive. Knowledge does. On the other side of the city, volunteers run a mobile testing station parked under a bridge near a popular nightclub. The van looks ordinary, white, dented, anonymous, but inside it's a fortress of compassion. They test small samples, catalogue pills, record data. Each time they find nitazenes, they post an alert within hours. Red pills marked with bull logo, "Do not use," contaminated with synthetic opioids. It's not policy, it's survival. The world outside these vans doesn't move fast enough. Governments argue about morals, not molecules. And while they debate, chemistry keeps writing new nightmares into the bloodstream of the young. Yet, under the fluorescent hum of those makeshift labs, there's a different kind of victory. Every test, every warning, every hand that learns how to spray naloxone is an act of defiance against inevitability. The iron law may be unbreakable, but people aren't made of iron, they're made of will. And sometimes will bends the rules of nature just long enough to save a life. As Dr. Joni locks up the clinic that night, she glances at the shelf of antidotes and whispers to herself, not as a doctor but as a human being exhausted by loss, "If the world insists on making the poison stronger, then we set to make the mercy faster." Across the ocean, the headlines have begun to sound familiar. Sudden clusters of overdoses in Bristol, Glasgow and Manchester, paramedics describing bodies that go blue in seconds, coroners whispering a new word that feels too clinical for what it means, nitazenes. The epidemic that once seemed an American tragedy is now drifting silently into Europe's bloodstream. In a narrow street in Bristol, rain hisses against the cobblestones as two outreach workers move from one alley to another, checking the regulars, men and women who have known addiction for years, but are now terrified of what's replaced their heroin. "It looks the same," one of them says, "but it isn't. It burns colder. It takes people down before they can even exhale. They've lost 6 friends in 2 weeks." One of them, a user named Manny, speaks to a camera crew with eyes half shut from exhaustion. "I only smoked it once," he mutters. "Felt like the first time I ever took anything. Too good, too quick. You can't explain it. You stop wanting to feel. You stop wanting anything." His voice cracks when he mentions his friend Kez, who didn't wake up. "It's not heroin anymore," he says. "It's something else, something that doesn't care." Experts in London are calling it the grey batch, heroin laced with nitazenes, spreading like wildfire through street supplies. The dealers don't even know what's in it. They cut, mix and sell by habit, chasing profit over safety. A half-gram too pure can kill 5 people before sunrise. Dr. Laura Stevens, a toxicologist from Birmingham, warns that Europe's relative safety is an illusion. We used to say our heroin supply was stable because of Afghanistan, she explains, sitting in her office surrounded by stacks of test reports. But when the Taliban banned poppy cultivation in 2021, it left a vacuum, and chemistry rushed to fill it. She traces the map with her pen from the labs in China through Eastern Europe into the ports of Rotterdam and Hamburg. Every link in the chain is invisible until someone dies, she says softly, and by then it's already too late. In a small London clinic, a volunteer named Sam is teaching people how to recognize an overdose. His tone is gentle, almost parental. Look at their chest, listen for breath. Don't wait, spray, call, stay. He repeats the words like prayer beads. Outside, buses roar past, indifferent. But inside, there's a quiet urgency, a determination born not of optimism but of refusal, a refusal to let Europe become the next obituary. Because behind every statistic, behind every sterile report and coded alert, there are faces, mothers in tears, friends who can't stop shaking, survivors who don't know whether to feel grateful or guilty. And beneath it all, a simple truth. The crisis isn't coming, it's already here. Still, in that knowledge lies the faintest glimmer of hope, because at least now someone is watching, someone is warning, someone is listening before the silence falls again. By early 2024, the headlines have stopped sounding like warnings and started sounding like weather reports, predictable, tragic, and daily. 4 dead in Bristol, 7 overdoses in Manchester, 2 students collapse outside Glasgow club. The reporters speak in calm, practiced tones, the way people describe distant storms, but the storm has arrived. In the morgues, the pathologists whisper about how clean the new deaths look. No bruising, no chaos, just stillness, as if life had quietly stepped out of the room. Nitazenes don't make a scene. They work with surgical precision, silencing the brain's breath command like a switch flipped off in the dark. And yet, somewhere between fear and fatigue, something begins to shift. Not in the governments or the courtrooms, but in the streets, among nurses, paramedics, teachers, the invisible backbone of any civilization that refuses to give up on its living. In London, a nurse named Rebecca sets up a small table outside a shelter. On it are naloxone sprays, clean needles, testing kits, and a handwritten sign that reads, "You can ask anything. No judgment." Her breath fogs in the February air as she explains to anyone who stops, this isn't about approval, it's about survival. A man with trembling hands takes one of the sprays and asks quietly, what if it sips too late? She meets his eyes. Then you still try. That sips what we do. We try. Inside, the outreach van's heater hums weakly. On the wall, a small poster lists the new nitazenes by name: metanitazane, protonitazane, atonitazane, words that sound almost beautiful, like something from a science museum, until you realize each one is a doorway to silence. Rebecca keeps her rhythm. Distribute, explain, listen. Each kit handed over feels like a candle lit in a tunnel that has no end but still demands light. She doesn't believe she can stop the wave, but she believes in saving one more, and then one more after that. Meanwhile, politicians are still debating in marble halls about enforcement and morality, about optics and funding, as though death negotiates, but the people on the ground know better. They've seen what a single dose of naloxone can do, how the color rushes back, how breath returns like a miracle you can hold in your hands. Across Europe, quiet revolutions are forming. Underground networks trade information faster than governments do. Harm reduction centers open under neutral names. And though the death toll climbs, so does a kind of weary courage, the realization that salvation in this war won't come from the top down but from the ground up. Somewhere in Bristol, a young outreach volunteer looks out over the empty riverfront and whispers to no one in particular, "We might not win this, but we set not going to let it win easily." And in that whisper, fragile and human, lies the last barrier between extinction and endurance, not policy, not power, but persistence. By the time summer 2024 arrives, Europe feels uneasy in its own skin. The headlines have gone cold, the sirens quieter, but the hospitals know what the silence means. It's not calm, it's the pause between waves. Nitazenes are no longer a foreign word whispered by specialists. They're a shadow at the edge of every nightclub, every festival, every pill that changes hands in a city that pretends not to see. In Paris, a coroner opens his 15th report of the week. Cause of death: opioid overdose. Suspected nitazenes. He doesn't look surprised anymore. The numbers keep rising. The budgets stay still. Each new body feels less like a statistic and more like a message written too late. In Berlin, a young producer sets up his equipment in a warehouse rave. His music shakes the walls, the bass rattling through concrete. He knows what's out there in the crowd. Fake ecstasy, counterfeit cocaine, pills laced with things no human should touch. But the faces in front of him are shining, lost in rhythm and neon. He wonders briefly, how many of them will still be here next week? Then he turns the volume up, as if the sound itself might keep them alive. Meanwhile, in small clinics across Europe, scientists hunch over test results with the same dread that priests used to reserve for confessions. Each sample tells the same story: more purity, more potency, less warning. This one sips stronger, they murmur. And it sips spreading faster. The border agencies can't keep up. The supply chains have learned to shapeshift, to hide within the legitimate, to travel disguised as medicine or vitamins. The factories that once made perfumes and supplements now make death by the kilogram, shipped and labeled like anything else. And still, amid the darkness, there are flickers of defiance. In a park in Glasgow, a group of volunteers sits in a circle, learning how to recognize overdose symptoms by candlelight. A local DJ who lost his brother last year trains them. It's not about saving everyone, he says, voice steady. It's about saving someone. They nod, solemn, each one holding a small orange spray, the size of hope itself. In a Lisbon hospital, a nurse named Anna tells her team that she stopped counting reversals. I don't need the numbers anymore, she says. I just need them to breathe. And perhaps that's what the silent pandemic really is. Not just a medical crisis, but a test of compassion. A reminder that in a world obsessed with punishment, mercy has become the rarest antidote of all. Outside, another night begins. The music starts again, as it always does, but hidden among the beats and laughter, a quiet resistance hums just beneath the surface. People carrying small sprays, people refusing to look away, people holding the line between life and absence. It sits fragile, yes, but it sits there. And for now, that's enough to keep the world breathing. The crisis no longer makes headlines. The novelty has faded, replaced by fatigue, the kind that makes society turn its face away. But beneath that silence, something is growing, quiet and steady, understanding, the kind that doesn't arrive through laws or speeches, but through the slow accumulation of small mercies. In Manchester, a recovering addict named Liam spends his evenings walking the canal with a backpack full of naloxone kits. He isn't paid, he isn't sponsored, he just goes where the police don't. When someone collapses, and they always do, he kneels, sprays, waits. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You don't forget the ones you lose, he says softly. You just carry them with you. In Dublin, university students have begun a movement called Know What You Take. They distribute testing strips at concerts, hand out cards explaining how to recognize an overdose, and whisper to security guards not to confiscate, to listen. Their motto isn't rebellion, it's realism. They've seen what happens when ignorance pretends to be morality. And in Bristol, a mural has appeared overnight on the side of an old pharmacy, a human figure made of tiny dots dissolving into dust with one sentence written beneath it. He thought it was safe. No artist has claimed it, but people stop to look. Some even leave flowers. For the first time in decades, the conversation is shifting. Harm reduction isn't a fringe term anymore. It's a form of compassion dressed as pragmatism. Politicians still argue, of course, but now they're being interrupted by doctors, by parents, by survivors who refuse to be statistics. Professor McLeod stands before a committee, exhausted but unyielding. "This isn't about crime," he says, voice shaking slightly. "It's about chemistry, about time, about breath. You can't arrest your way out of a molecule." His words hang in the air, and for once no one dares to interrupt him. Outside, the city is waking to another normal day. Buses, rain, laughter, deadlines. The crisis continues, invisible to most. But in the cracks between despair and indifference, something fragile takes root: awareness. Because awareness is the first defense. Awareness is what makes a stranger stop to check a pulse, what makes a friend carry a spray in their bag, what makes a parent knock on their child's door a second time just to make sure. And maybe that's how it changes. Not with revolutions, not with speeches, but with tiny persistent acts of grace. The storm hasn't passed, but for the first time people are learning to stand in it together. And in that shared defiance, that stubborn human instinct to keep breathing even when the air runs thin, the world begins, quietly, haltingly, to heal. By the end of the year, the statistics blur together. Thousands of overdoses, hundreds of deaths, and uncountable saves. Governments speak of mitigation, journalists of crisis management, but the people who live through it have stopped using big words. They call it what it is: survival. In a cold shelter outside Birmingham, Rebecca, the nurse from before, finishes her night shift. Her hands smell faintly of antiseptic and coffee. She sits by the window and watches the first light stain the horizon. It's quiet now, the kind of quiet that feels earned. On the cot behind her, a young man is sleeping, his chest rising slowly, his breath shallow but steady. 2 hours ago, he wasn't breathing at all. She looks at the small orange device on the table, the used naloxone spray that brought him back. "You get to live another day," she whispers, half to him, half to herself. Somewhere in Bristol, Liam walks home from his night route along the canals. The city smells like rain and iron. In his backpack, 2 sprays remain unused. He touches them as one might touch a relic, grateful and afraid. When people ask him why he keeps doing it, he only shrugs. "Because someone did it for me once," he says. In Sydney, Dr. Joni closes the clinic early for the first time in months. She turns off the fluorescent light and stands for a moment in the soft dark, listening to the hum of machines cooling down. The wall clock ticks like a metronome. "Nobody died today," she says quietly. "That's enough. Only Bolthy died today," she says quietly. And in a lab in Canberra, Professor McLeod watches a new test result load on his screen. It's clean, no nitazines. For once, he exhales the sound almost a prayer. Science, like compassion, is patient. Sometimes it loses, sometimes it wins, but it always continues. Across continents and oceans, the pattern repeats: despair, intervention, breath, silence. The rhythm of a species still learning how to save itself. No one expects miracles anymore, only moments, a heartbeat caught in time, a breath reclaimed, a hand that refuses to let go. Because that's how humanity survives its own mistakes, not through perfection but through persistence, through strangers kneeling beside strangers, through small orange sprays, through those who refuse to stop trying. And perhaps, years from now, when the word nitazines fades from the headlines and finds its place in history books, someone will remember not just the deaths but the defiance, the way ordinary people chose to fight back with science, with empathy, with breath. The crisis won't be remembered for how it began. It will be remembered for how many refused to let it end in silence. And somewhere, as dawn breaks over another sleepless city, a heartbeat steadies. For now, that sip's enough. It's winter again, and the world has grown quieter. The headlines that once screamed tragedy have been replaced by newer fears, newer wars, newer storms. But in the corners of hospitals and shelters, the battle against nitazines hasn't stopped, it's only changed shape. In a small community hall in Bristol, the same city that once trembled under the weight of overdoses, a group gathers every Thursday night. They bring no banners, no cameras, no speeches, just chairs, coffee, and stories. A mother reads from a letter her son wrote before he died, the paper trembling in her hands, her voice breaking but determined. Across from her sits a young man who overdosed twice last year and lived. He listens, eyes lowered, nodding slowly. When she finishes, he whispers, "He saved me too." But oh, these meetings are no longer about statistics or blame. They're about remembrance and rebuilding, about how grief, when shared, becomes a bridge instead of a prison. In Sydney, Caitlin, the volunteer who once worked that disastrous dance night, has started teaching first aid to high school students. She stands in front of them, sleeves rolled up, holding a training dummy and a plastic spray. "You'll never know," she tells them softly, "when someone will need you to remember this." Some laugh nervously. Some listen. One day one of them will use what she taught, and that will be enough. Dr. Joni still walks to her clinic every morning, even when the sky looks heavy and the city feels tired of hearing bad news. The staff greets her with tired smiles, but there's pride there too. She keeps a list on her office wall, every name of a patient who survived. The list is long now, covering the paint. "It's my calendar," she says, "every date marked by someone who made it back." In a church basement in Dublin, a quiet memorial burns candles for the lost. The priest doesn't preach, he just listens. Outside, the sound of traffic merges with faint music from a nearby pub. Life continues, as it always does, loud, imperfect, unstoppable. And in a warehouse lab in Canberra, Professor MacLeod looks out the window as dawn cuts the fog into gold. A new shipment of seized pills sits on his table. He'll test them, record them, alert the public if he must. He no longer wonders whether the work is worth it. He knows it is. Science, he's learned, is just another form of faith, belief in the idea that truth, revealed fast enough, can save someone who hasn't yet fallen. When he turns off the lights, the hum of his machines lingers like the echo of a heartbeat. Outside, the city exhales. Somewhere a siren wails, then fades. And for one long, fragile moment, the world feels suspended between darkness and dawn, a breath held, a promise unbroken. Because despite everything, the losses, the failures, the noise, there are still people willing to kneel beside the fallen, still hands that press the antidote, still hearts that refuse to give up. And that is how history quietly begins to heal itself. Not with victory, but with endurance. Not with silence, but with breath. Years pass. The panic fades, as all panics do, replaced by documentaries and data, by the comfort of hindsight. The word Neitazins becomes a cautionary echo in classrooms and policy meetings, something to study, something to mourn, something that everyone swears will never happen again. But in the places where it did happen, the shelters, the clinics, the warehouses that once served as makeshift triage rooms, the memory remains heavier, more human. In Bristol, the canal path where Liam used to walk with his backpack of naloxone kits has been cleaned up, paved over. Joggers pass without knowing the history under their feet. The old graffiti warning, "Don't buy the grey batch," has been painted white. But every year, on the anniversary of the night the overdoses began, someone leaves a small orange spray on the railing. No name, no note, just the symbol of what it took to keep breathing. In Sydney, the supervised injecting centre now trains nurses from all over the world. Dr. Joni is older, her hair streaked with silver, but her hands are as steady as ever. She keeps a small framed note above her desk, written by a woman who overdosed in 2022 and survived. It says, "You gave me back my tomorrow." When new staff arrive, Joni points to it and says, "That's why we're here, not for numbers, for tomorrows." In Canberra, Professor MacLeod's lab has become a model for rapid drug analysis. His machines hum around the clock, scanning, decoding, identifying. Each time a new compound appears, his team names it, logs it, sends the warning before tragedy can spread. On his office wall is a newspaper clipping from 2025, the night the music stopped. Underneath, written in pen, "We didn't stop it all, but we stopped some, and that matters." And in Manchester, a mural of Liam now faces the river, his hands outstretched, a naloxone kit glowing faintly in painted light. Under it reads a single phrase: "We keep each other alive." It isn't triumph. Not really. The drug trade never sleeps. The chemistry never stops. Somewhere new molecules are already being born, stronger, smaller, cheaper. But this time, the world is not asleep. Clinics are prepared, information moves faster, and compassion has finally found its way into policy. The lesson of the Neitazin years wasn't about drugs or death. It was about response. It taught a generation that saving lives isn't just a duty for doctors or experts, but for everyone. It reminded the world that mercy can be trained, that hope can be learned, and that that simple, fragile act is something worth defending together. And so, as another night begins somewhere and another heartbeat falters, someone, maybe a stranger, maybe a friend, will reach into their pocket and pull out that small orange spray. They sit or kneel down, trembling, whispering the same words that have saved thousands before. Hold on. Just breathe. The world, for now, listens and breathes back.